This story takes place in the dense forests of Canada. A group of friends excited for a camping trip set out to enjoy their weekend in isolation. The weather was perfect, and they built their campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories late into the night. However, as darkness fell, the atmosphere shifted. They heard faint whispers, but could never pinpoint where they were coming from. At first, it seemed like a trick of the wind, but the voices grew louder and clearer. They could make out what sounded like their names being called from deep in the forest. Terrified, they searched the area around their campsite, but found nothing. As they sat back down, a lone figure appeared at the edge of the trees. It was a man disheveled, his clothes torn, and his eyes wide with terror. He ran towards them screaming, "They're coming! They won't stop until you're gone!" The friends, frightened, helped the man, and in the process, he explained that he had been lost in the woods for days after hearing similar voices. Just as they began to set up an escape plan, the man abruptly turned pale, his body convulsing. He fell to the ground, lifeless, his eyes still locked onto the forest as if watching something behind them. They were never found, and no one ever figured out what truly happened that night. While camping in a remote forest in the Appalachian Mountains, a hiker came across an old ranger station that seemed abandoned. After hiking for hours and losing his way, he knocked on the door for help. The Lone Ranger inside welcomed him with a cold, almost eerie greeting. His voice sounded lifeless, and his eyes had an unsettling blankness to them. Despite the strange feeling, the hiker stayed for the night, thinking the ranger was just lonely and needed some company. Over dinner, the ranger kept offering strange suggestions about avoiding the northern side of the forest, making comments about strange creatures lurking there. That night, the hiker woke up to the sound of whispers and the ranger standing at the window, staring out into the darkness. Frightened, the hiker decided to leave early the next morning. He woke to find the ranger gone, the station completely abandoned and dilapidated, as if no one had lived there in years. A missing persons report from 20 years earlier matched the ranger's description. It turned out the man had died during a failed rescue mission, but his spirit apparently continued to haunt the area, trying to warn others of the dark forces that lurked in the forest. A couple went camping in a remote area near the Rocky Mountains and found an old abandoned cabin. They thought it was the perfect spot for a few days of solitude, but something was off from the moment they arrived. The wood felt unnaturally cold, even with the fire lit. The door creaked as they entered, and the air inside seemed thick. As night descended, strange noises echoed through the trees. The couple heard scraping sounds coming from the roof and the floorboards. Initially thinking it was just an animal, they ignored it, but then came a knock on the door. They opened it to find nobody outside, but just as they were about to turn away, the door slammed shut behind them. The wind howled and an icy chill entered the cabin. Turning toward the corner, they saw shadowy figures forming in the darkness. The cabin itself seemed alive with menacing intent. Panicked, they ran to the windows, only to find them sealed shut, the glass fogging up with every breath they took. Desperate to escape, they made a run for it into the freezing night, but couldn't find their way back to their car. The authorities later found their belongings scattered in the woods, but the couple was never seen again. The last campers to stay at that cabin reported a chilling sense of someone watching them, and their strange encounters remain unsolved. These true camping horror stories leave behind questions and a deep unease. Sometimes the most terrifying things are those that can't be explained.